Hello there, and welcome back to the Disc Connected. I'm here with Chris O'Neill, who is a filmmaker, video essayist, contributor, and even like video editor from what I've seen for some of these companies lately. Is that right?
Yeah, I've apart from the video essays, I do trailers as well. But I've also done, in one instance, I actually edited like an interview featurette on the Radio On disc for Fun City Editions.
Yeah.
So I've dabbled in a bunch of different kind of areas. So yeah, I guess I could say I'm an editor.
We will get into all of the nitty-gritty details in just a few minutes, of course, but the main thing I really wanted to point out first is just the wide variety of stuff that you've covered. So there's going to be a lot that we can discuss today. You're not really hooked to one genre, and then on top of that, you've not really been doing a lot of the video essays for a super long time, but even then, your name is kind of everywhere at the moment. You've been hitting a lot of companies really hard. How's the last couple of years been for you?
Well, I edited my first video essay in July of 2020, and I worked out within about 2.5 years. I did 35 video essays, plus I did an audio commentary, plus I edited an interview featurette, and I've done trailers as well. So it's not like it came from nowhere. It's kind of interesting. I used to do a lot of film writing online and magazines and things. And also I'm a filmmaker, I do a lot of experimental films, short films, that kind of thing, often using footage from pre-existing works. So when Jonathan at Fun City Editions contacted me saying, would you be interested in a video essay? He saw it as, well, you do this and you do that. Well, why don't you just blend them together? And I was like, I've never thought of that before. And suddenly once I did one or two or three, I hit the ground running. And I think I've worked with about 15 different labels now in that time. Doing all these kind of things. So yeah, and sometimes it's when they reach out to me to ask. Sometimes it was me chasing if I've heard they have a particular title, that kind of thing. So yeah, in a very short amount of time, like I said, 2.5 years, 35 video essays. I can't believe it myself. But it's worth noting that a lot of that time was during the pandemic when I had nothing else going on. So that helped.
I will have everything linked down in the description below, and one of the things is going to be your Vimeo, because a lot of the stuff that you've worked on is on your personal Vimeo, and we haven't talked about this beforehand, but I've binged through as much of it as I possibly could, and really enjoyed your style, and a lot of the way that you communicate with people that you know are going to be watching these essays or these experimental films. I don't know. It's a really interesting way to get your personality across. And with experimental films and this unique texture, it just shows the, I guess, really careful touch of a filmmaker that will put out something like you have. I've really enjoyed everything that you've put out there.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear, because when you're making experimental film and when you're making video essays, and you're very much working within a bubble to some extent. You know, I mean, when you're making movies with other people, you got cast and crew, and you know, there's different elements along the way. But when you're working with things that are much more based on footage that pre-exists, or experimenting with techniques and layers and textures and all kinds of things, you're doing it all on your own. And in your own little bubble, and you don't always know what people think about them, which is why sometimes it's nice to read reviews of video essays and things and stuff I've done online. But to hear that people appreciate a lot of different aspects of my work, it's nice to hear, you know. So thank you.
Well, you've got an absolutely lovely voice for it, so I wanted to highlight that. But the other thing, you're only the second one that I've been able to say this to, is congrats on that Shelf Shock Rewind Award for Out of the Blue for the video essay that was out last year. And honestly, the other one was Amanda, because I just talked to her a few months ago.
I've seen that interview. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoy anything with Amanda. She's great to listen to. But thank you. That video essay was it was interesting how that one came around. What happened was, it was originally I originally reached out to the people behind the restoration of the film, saying could I do something, and by the time it got picked up for distribution in the UK by the British Film Institute, the video essay just hadn't worked. But the British Film Institute had heard I was going to do one, and they said, "Well, would you like to? Because we've got a lot of content that's based on Dennis Hopper. It'd be nice to have something that is specific to Linda Manns." And the deadline was short by then between needing to have it finished, but also I had just done one on Linda Manns for the Days of Heaven disc that Imprint put out in Australia. So I kind of was like, I really want to do this, but I just felt like I wasn't in the right place to do it at that time with the deadline and other projects and things. So I had already worked with Amanda on a video essay that she asked me to work on for her, the Toolbox Murders, which I think is an incredible video essay. And I don't mean because I'm involved. I mean because of what Amanda what Amanda brought to it. You know, I just tried to illustrate what she wanted to get across her point. But so I asked her, would she like to contribute to this one, and she did, and I'm delighted she did. And I think it works out really well. And again, that's not me self-praise, that's me talking about Amanda's work. So yeah, thank you. I'm really proud of that. And then it was great that it was on the Severin disc as well. So yeah, it was great to work on, and great to have that award.
It's an astounding release. Both the BFI and the Severin release, they're incredible. And then to see this film finally getting discovered by so many people is just fascinating. I love seeing it spread like wildfire lately. And I think I was able to mention it to Amanda by the time that I talked to her, but I got to see it in my local theater this year. They brought the restoration to one of the nice little art house theaters that we have, and seeing that in a room that was literally probably 85% full of people that had probably most of them had seen it before, but a handful that were just discovering it for the first time, and really watching them just be bowled over by the emotional beats. It was such a great theater experience.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great film. I first saw it when I was 16 or 17. Wow. And I was in rural Ireland, in a small town in Ireland, so a lot of the beats about where they were in that story, I could relate to, not specifically with what was going on with the characters and things, but that you know, that lifestyle, small town kind of yeah. So it really hit me hard. But yeah, I mean, it has to be one of the most, you know, excuse the language, what the fuck openings ever. Yeah. And it's just like, if that's the opening, where's this film going?
Right. And the funny thing is, the way they set up the opening, it really mirrors the ending kind of beautifully. They do it really, really well. And my wife had never seen it before this year, so to watch it with her for the first time, I loved that she couldn't shut up about it for the next probably day and a half, because she was just completely awestruck by it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of Dennis Hopper as a director. I mean, the last movie is one of my favorite movies, but
yeah,
I'd have to tie between the two films that would be my favorite films that Hopper directed, would be the last movie and Out of the Blue. They're both very different in certain ways. Obviously, I think the last movie is much more experimental, but the fact that Out of the Blue hangs together so well when you hear about how turbulent the production was, I mean, it just comes together absolutely perfectly. Like, you wouldn't think there was anything like that behind the scenes. It just seems so perfect, you know? So yeah, it's a wonderful movie.
I agree. So getting into what you've done all kinds of experimental films. First thing I'd love to throw out there is, what are the main inspirations behind those, other than what you've taken from the pre-existing footage? Because it's not every day that we get access to, you know, genuine experimental films. You get a few people that are, you know, doing shorts that are, you know, a little avant-garde, but truly like experimental. I'm seeing into someone's soul with this. That's not as common.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of influences, it's really interesting because with experimental cinema, obviously this is a very broad just way of putting it, but it tends to be
Yeah.
kind of almost like two schools of thought from it, which is where it's coming from an artist who moves into moving image, or a filmmaker who's going into the avant-garde. Does that make any
Right.
sense?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I'm obviously coming from it from a cinema point of view and deconstructing cinema, and it comes from a fascination of, I used to find myself watching a movie and there would be one particular actor, for example, that I would just find fascinating, and I would just fixate on. A very recent example would be The Hateful Eight. It's an okay movie, I enjoyed it, but I absolutely adored Jennifer Jason Leigh's performance in it.
Mm.
And I found myself watching her, and there are scenes in that film where she's doing nothing, yet she's doing something. If you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
It's such an amazing performance, and I like often focusing on performances by people, but performances in regards to screen presence and body language. So, for example, there's one I've done that's from a tatty old 16mm print of the 1975 thriller Russian Roulette.
Mm-hmm.
And Christina Rains, who is an incredibly underrated actress. I think she's great. I just chose all the scenes with her in reel 2. So I projected this 16mm print that had turned all red, and I just filmed all the scenes with her, and I made this kind of crazy thing where she's a secondary character in the film, but I make it about just her scenes, which gives it this weird quality of it being like this strange office-based surreal drama or something, where like there's telexes coming through and fax machines and other office workers, and her walking around and her answering the phone, or her getting out of bed answering the phone. So that's what I like to do. And in terms of influences, I honestly don't know in terms of other filmmakers, and that's not me saying it. I'm not influenced. I obviously am.
Right.
I mean, one of my favorite filmmakers is someone who'd be considered incredibly experimental, which would be Nicholas Roeg. I'm absolutely obsessed with him. One of my favorite movies is Kenneth Anger's Scorpio Rising. I love that movie. But in terms of people who specifically influenced me, I honestly couldn't tell you. And I think when it comes to my experimental work, I purposely leave it that way because I like to explore pre-existing, maybe narrative cinema, and do something quirky with it without actually thinking of, I want to do it like this filmmaker did, or I want to do it like that filmmaker. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure someone could watch one of my films and go, I could name 10 filmmakers who's done something similar, or 20 or 30, and they're probably right, but it's not where I'm coming at, But that's what I think you can say with all art forms.
Of course,
It's like how many stories are written or how many movies are made where it's essentially the same plots over and over again, but it's hopefully how someone executes them that makes them worthwhile or different,
And funny enough, I was going to make a similar sort of observation about a lot of your visual essays, because they seem to be this singular force that have this really unique background between every single one, where it's very educational, but somehow has this magnetic approach that no matter what the topic is, and there's a wide variety of topics you've covered on these visual essays, and it's not like somebody could say, I'm going to listen to all of Chris O'Neill's visual essays because I love this filmmaker or I love this film style, because there's so many across the board. But each and every one, I've started it, and it's, well, okay, I'm hunkering down because I'm probably going to have to watch this twice because I'm going to take notes. There's some amazing stuff in here. I've loved so much of your essays, and just as somebody that is aspiring to be basically what you're doing. Is there a certain approach that you try to take with each of these essays? Because they're astounding.
Well, thank you first. It's always nice to hear things like that. In terms of approach, honestly, it depends on the material, because some video essays focus just on the material you're looking at, and then some have actual historical context added to them. I mean, for example, one of my earliest ones was the Canon film New Year's Evil that was on the 88 Films disc.
Yeah.
And in that, I tried to go into the release pattern of the film, how it came out in the States, things like that. When I did a video essay on Trancers, which is one of my favorite movies, the Charles Band film, I went into all the different movies that it played with in the UK and British cinemas when it was on double bills, So sometimes you do that kind of research. But then for something like, say, my video essay on I Start Counting, that just focused on the movie and the story and the character. That's one of my favorite essays, to be honest, because it's this wonderful coming of age drama / like psycho thriller. It has these two kind of things going on, but I always saw it as a character study and a coming of age drama, and I really find some of that film really heartbreaking and touching. It really gets to me, some of it. It really I get quite emotional watching it. So in regards to it depends on which film I'm watching and how it works, like something that's and also how I make them varies as well. Sometimes I will just record a voiceover, have it completely done, or get someone else to record the voiceover, or I record the voiceover, whatever it is, and then to that edit images. Or sometimes what I do, and it depends purely on what you're working with, is I'll record a bit of voiceover, edit footage, then see where it's going with the footage, seeing how things play out, seeing where would be a nice scene to put in after that piece of information, and then record a bit more, and then edit and record a bit more. Now, obviously, that's very painstaking, and it's quite torturous at times, but sometimes it just feels like the right way of doing it, So there's no real... I'm sorry.
I was going to point out is that it seems like that's where the experimental film really, the backgrounds there really kind of shine for you, because it seems like it would be a similar process. You've got that pre-existing footage. You don't necessarily know where it's going. You're fixating on something, and then as it carries on, maybe it's telling a different story by the time you're done.
Yeah, I think that's what you've picked up on there is probably right. Yeah, I agree. And I'm not saying that as in, yes, I agree, that's what I do with my art. I mean, going, yeah, gee, yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, okay.
I love that. And I mean, the I don't even know how to word it. A lot of the stuff that you've done is so varied. And a lot of these people that contribute to these essays, they have these very niche specialties. Like somebody will always talk about animal attacks films. Somebody will always talk about giallos, whatever. But I mean, even if we only talk about releases on the Vinegar Syndrome website, the wide variety of stuff you've covered. I mean, so many of the Fun City Edition stuff. You're on the Censor disc. You're on the Undefeatable disc that just came out. The Lux Eterna visual essay. And then just recently you were on Please Baby Please from Music Box. Burning Paradise, Biozombie. There's so many that... like, these don't really go together, and yet somehow you find something to love in every single one that's educational and just lovely. It's a gift, man. You're doing great.
Well, thanks. I mean, besides being a filmmaker and a writer, I'm also a cinema programmer. Like, I worked out recently. Yeah. I've been a cinema programmer for 19 years.
Wow.
So I started when I was in my early 20s, and and even before that, in my teens, obsessed with film and had a very sort of encyclopedic knowledge.
Right.
Not so much in the last couple of years anymore. Now I have 2 kids. Like anything that stuff doesn't stay in the brain as much as it used to. But due to lack of sleep and other things to think about and worry about. But in regards to studying different films and looking at them and thinking about an audience for them, and also having this weird practical quality to them as well, because I program art house cinemas, and art house cinema is contradiction in terms. Art is creativity and cinema is money, so it's sometimes trying to find this balance between commerce and artistic vision, So I tend to find when I'm doing these video essays that on one hand I'm trying to be creative, and I'm trying to either give some sort of knowledge or some sort of angle for someone to think about differently on the film or whatever, but I also try to do it in a very practical way that's very very linear. I mean, I joke about it, but I joke that I like to think of myself, whether it's experimental cinema or my video essays, that I'm like I'm trying to do it like a Don Siegel film or something, or like one of those 4-reeler New World Pictures films, or Charles Band. A strange analogy to make, but it's that same kind of mindset of trying to get everything very concise and condensed and worthwhile at the same time.
Yeah, that's very true. And I mean, the idea of film programming, first of all, we don't highlight that as an art form in itself enough, because there's so much thought that has to go into some of these, because not only are you curating for really what you want to see, but also you're supplying art to an entire community, and the entire mood of a night or a weekend, or the ability to change somebody's life with discovering some of these films goes a long way. And truly choosing what to make some of these essays about is kind of curating in that same way, because in Lux Eterna, obviously the idea of this film being in split screen, it's important to the film, and you could stop there and really highlight it from that. But highlighting all split screen cinema and the way that this has been done is, there's so many different unique approaches that you could take, and you've made some great choices along the way. Is there a certain video essay that you've done that you're just very, very proud of, and you think might be like the most impactful one for you looking back on?
Well, I have some favorites, and I have certain films that mean something.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the one at the moment that I'm most proud of, partially because I just can't believe I did it in a very short amount of time and everything, and how well I think it came out myself. I'd like to think it came out well, is the one on the censor disc, Freedom is the Image, about the history of the origins of the video nasties phenomena in Britain. I'm really proud of that one. Because I mean, that one's like my longest one as well. I think it's like 33 minutes, I think. And honestly, I just sat down, wrote it in a couple of days, and it was all just there, a bit of tweaking and a bit of editing, but it just came through, because it's a fascinating subject on several levels.
Yeah.
You have the films in question are fun, or movies that I admire or enjoy or love or whatever. But it's also this idea that people found them dangerous. That's really fascinating. And what I found really interesting in the research I did was there was obviously a media campaign with the tabloid newspapers and broadsheets, everyone really, to get these things banned because they're harmful to our children. Was when you're reading some of these reports, on one hand they're giving a catalogue of these are the horrible scenes in the films. That's one thing. But when you actually start reading little insinuations about the films that aren't there, which make them sound even worse.
Right.
For example, when they're talking about the film Snuff, one newspaper article said something like, even though it was disproven to be real by the FBI, some still believe that isn't the case, which was obviously complete nonsense. But by putting that in there, people thought, oh my God, real death is in these movies, real torture, you know? Or another one detailing what was happening in I Spit on Your Grave. Now, that's extreme in one hand, the content of the film itself, and like here we are, how many years old is that film now? Is it 35 years, 45 years now?
Somewhere around 45, yeah.
Must be 45 years. It's still contentious. I mean, even as of like 10 or 15 years ago, where I'm here in Ireland, the film was banned, again, even in a heavily cut form. You know, so it still rubs people up the wrong way. But one article stated that the main character was an underage girl, which she isn't in the film. You know, she's a grown woman. But by putting that little detail in there, that just makes it even sound even more disturbing and not right. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
So it was reading these different media reports and the salacious language they'd use, and on one hand saying, aren't these things horrible, while printing images from the video covers and things like that. So it was like, on one hand, people were reading them saying these are disgusting, yet they're looking at them and reading these catalogue of disgusting things that are happening, you know?
Dying to see more of it, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really about the way the media manipulated these things, but also the film companies themselves had their own they had to accept responsibility for some of what they were doing. Well, they weren't just putting the movies out, but they had these wonderfully lurid box art covers where, you know, they wanted someone to walk into a video shop and go, Jesus, what's that? I want to rent that. You know, I mean, if you think of Driller Killer, I mean, it's like Abel Ferrara's Driller Killer is more like a Polanski film, really. And there's a couple of instances of very, you know, a couple of seconds of gore here and there, but overall it's quite restrained.
Fairly
tame, but by taking the image of the drill going into the head and having that on the front cover of the box, that film became like the poster boy for why these films are horrible and why they need to be banned. You know, so anyway, all of that going into this video essay was really interesting for me. And also, someone I admire quite greatly said they saw it and said they thought it was the best audiovisual piece they've seen about the video nasties, which was really quite humbling to me. Because I've seen, I mean, for example, David Gregory made an absolutely amazing two-part documentary, Ban the Sadist Videos, which is one of my favorite documentaries. Jake West as well did a great two-part documentary as well. Those documentaries are amazing and they should be checked out. But for someone to say that they really liked mine, and the fact that mine found some sort of angle that wasn't covered in those ones, or rather it probably was covered, but I just found a different cockeyed kind of side view of looking at some of the aspects that weren't quite covered the same way, I should say, in those documentaries. You know, it was quite humbling, and I was happy that someone got something out of it. So I'm really proud of that video essay. But like I said, I've done 34 other ones. So you know, I mean, I Start Counting is a personal favorite. I'm really proud of the Out of the Blue one and the Toolbox Murders one. Both of those I did with Amanda Reyes. Morven Caller video essay, it's just one of my favorite movies, so that was really something to do. And one other one that just come to mind is the Year of the Dragon video essay I did for the imprint release of that movie, because it was nice to basically, the whole video essay was about 20 minutes long, and it was defending Ariane's performance in that movie, because she got dragged over the coals for that movie. I mean, her career ended once it started in terms of being an actress, but I think she's great in that film. You know, my 20-minute video essay was basically defending her performance in that movie. So I'd love to. whether she would like it or not, I don't know. But I'd love to get it to a copy to her, just to sort of say, you did a great job, because she did. But anyway, but I'm sure I'm blanking right now. Like in 10 minutes time, I go, oh, and there was this other one. But
That's fine. Imprint, I think, kind of deserves a special little side round of applause for a moment, because I've been really pleased with how they've been moving towards, and fairly supportive their entire run about contextual extras, because in a lot of instances some of these films would go with nothing on any other company, or they'd get a couple old archival interviews and say, yeah, that's a great release, let's throw it out there. Imprint has been, first off, steadily increasing the number of things that they're putting on discs, but on top of that, very supportive of you and Kat Ellinger and Daniel Kramer and all of these other people that are jumping on some of these releases, like Howard S. Berger, and giving them free reign, it looks like, at least from the outside, to say, what do you want to talk about this film or relate to this film? And you'll get something like Kat Ellinger defending Nastasia Kinski and saying, she deserves a lot more credit than she got, or what you're talking about right now on the Last Dragon. There's so many of these extras that you've never heard from somebody before, because a film will get taken out of context and not delivered with that educational approach. So yeah, Imprint, I feel like, deserves a lot more credit than they've gotten.
Yeah, no, they've been coming out with some great stuff. I mean, I'm proud of the ones I've worked on with them, but they've just done so many releases, and as you say, there is a lot of interesting extras that contextualize the works, and I think contextualizing cinema is very important, because there's all kinds of aspects that I think are worth looking at. For example, sometimes it could be contextualizing the release of a film, or the time period of the film, or where the filmmaker was coming from, what was politically going on at the time, that kind of thing, And then there's also just studying the film and coming up with different aspects, or a defense of certain actors or whatever, and there's some amazing box sets coming out as well. I can't keep up with them. They've just every month they seem to be announcing stuff. And unfortunately, importing from Australia is not cheap.
Right, it's gotten bad.
Yeah, I mean, all over the world it seems shipping costs and things have just gone through the roof. But no, they do some great work, and I still do a lot of trailers for them recently. I just did one recently for Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. I'm not involved on the disc, but that disc has, I've done the trailer, I'm not involved on any of the extras on the disc, but that disc has some great stuff on it. I'm really looking forward to seeing that myself. I mean, it's a film that's already been on Blu-ray. I had the Twilight Time disc, and then there was a Great Arrow edition, but the fact that Arrow edition had so much on it, and then Imprint could come up with another disc which has so much on it, it is really testament to what they're doing. That it's worth owning both of those releases, the Arrow and the Imprint release.
One more thing that I really wanted to highlight is, through the way that you communicate and the things that you seem to focus on, not only in the essays, but what I feel through the experimental film, and then what you post on social media, a lot of your life seems to be very musical. It seems like you've got this great passion for music and have been attached to it for a long time. And I don't know if that's evident to everybody or if it's just me, because it's been such a big part for me. But has music played a big part in your life? Because it certainly feels like it.
Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just never thought of that before. Because yes, it does. I mean, a lot of my video essays are scored by a collaborator I work with called Gabby Bam Bam, stage name, and she's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And what makes her so unique, I found, in terms of working with her, is I will show her the film I'm working on a video essay for, and she'll give me a musical interpretation of that film.
It's amazing.
I mean, Alphabet City was the very first one we ever did together. Then we did I Start Counting, Jeremy, Year of the Dragon, the Lux Eterna, the split screen video essay, and I don't always use pre-recorded, especially recorded scores. Sometimes I just work with the materials of the film. But yeah, sorry, it sounds like, if I'm not really answering the question, it's not that I don't agree. I just never thought of it. But I suppose I do have quite a passion for music. Well, funnily enough, like, when I get to do them, I don't know. But I keep saying, when I have downtime, maybe in 10 years' time, when I have downtime, I'd love to do a series of online video essays where it's just for the fun of it. Yeah. I will select subjects where I will do some just to run, And one I would love to do, for example, is focus on maybe sometimes a music video or even a song. I mean, I recently saw Pulp live, and one of my favorite songs of all time, one of my favorite albums, one of my favorite songs, and it has a great music video, is This Is Hardcore, that album and the title track. And I actually wanted to do a video essay where I discuss the music video. But of course, when you're discussing, if you're doing a video essay on a song, you have to be careful, because it's also music copyright as well.
Yep.
So I had this crazy idea where it's like, can I break down the song without using any of the song? Right. Just using the music video, highlighting the lyrics, having some sort of score created for it that somehow is a tribute to the video and the song, yet probably doesn't sound anything like it, Right. And this sounds crazy, and it probably sounds a bit pointless, but these are the things that are going through my head sometimes. Like, I'm laying there at night going, yeah, I'd really love to do a video essay on a music video, but not use any of the music. So
funny enough, I've had a lot of the same thoughts. I grew up kind of adjacent to the music industry. I did show promotions for a long time. I've had bands play in my living room a handful of times. I've even been in a few different music videos, and the amount of times that I've gone through on IMDb and been researching for a director, and you get through 1989, and then the next 7 entries are all music videos, and you're like, wait a minute, this makes perfect sense. I watched that thing so many times, and you can tell it's the exact same filmmaker, because he takes a lot of the same sentimentalities and applies it to those. And I could see a really great piece being on those.
Yeah, no, I mean, music video. I've done 5 or 6 music videos myself now, and one thing I tend to have in a lot of my experimental films, and it's been in the music videos, is female portraits, just female faces. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to because also I quite like the sometimes uncomfortableness maybe, but also the intimacy of someone looking into camera,
right,
and looking straight into the audience. I think there's something really uncomfortable in some circumstances, but also really emotional and intimate as well. And that's one great thing you could do with a music video, because they're a musician's performing the song to an audience, and therefore to camera. So sometimes some of the music videos can be an extension of that as well. And and I mean, also one of my favorite filmmakers is Tobe Hooper, and I only found out in recent years that he directed the video for "Dancing with Myself" by Billy Idol. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that video before, and of course, the one thing that is frustrating but understandable is when you were watching VH1 or MTV or whatever, they never gave the director credit.
Never.
So, and then years later, it's like you find out all these amazing auteur directors or whoever directed music videos, or sometimes like TV commercials.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, okay. Like I discovered 1 or 2 commercials recently, and that's Tony Scott. Okay, I can see that. Or Nicholas Rogue, he did a
Right.
few. Okay, and yeah, so it could be fascinating joining the dots once you know that, with these different filmmakers and sensibilities, and sometimes you can just drive yourself crazy and find dots that aren't there. Like
Right.
sometimes a filmmaker just does a project because the money's there, they have to do it, that's great. And you can convince yourself there's some sort of, well, I think the theme of this is what they were discovering,
Yeah.
and you can do that. But sometimes that can be fun, even if it might be a bit ridiculous or stretching things a bit thin, So
If I remember right, I think I remember hearing that Todd Field, who put out Tar last year, he's only released like 3 films, and I believe he's done like a ton of commercial work in between, and that's basically it. It just makes a living doing these fun little commercials, and then every once in a while, I'll just randomly make a masterpiece, basically.
Jonathan Glazer as well,
Yeah.
who made Under the Skin, and he makes a lot of commercials. And I think it was an interview with Tony Scott where he said what was great about commercials, making them, was you get given a lot of money to make things look good.
Yep.
So you can experiment with big budgets and technology that you can then bring to your future projects.
Yeah.
And when you think about that with his work, it's like, okay, that kind of makes sense. I can see that, So
You don't get play money when you're making a blockbuster.
Yeah.
you got to save
Exactly.
money.
Yeah, exactly. Well put. Yeah.
That's fun. I completely see that for a lot of these people, and I could see if somebody could give the time to some sort of I don't know, a revival of music video discs. I feel like that'd be really fun to get a handful of essays on some of these, but I imagine the rights entanglement there would be a nightmare to get everything together.
Yeah, and also one thing that really frustrates me is I'd love to see gorgeous digitally remastered copies of these videos from Film Elements. I mean, they did it. I mean, I knew this was something unusual, and then I realized why. Recently, they premiered a couple of years ago in Cannes a gorgeous 4K restoration of the I'm Still Standing video by Elton John. And I thought, wow, that's really unusual to take that step, to go back to the Film Elements. Then, of course, I discovered that in the biopic of, is it called Rocket Man? The biopic about Elton John? Yeah. The whole end sequence is a recreation of that video where they slot in footage from the original music video. So that's why there was a 4K scan done, but unfortunately, because of that, it was great that video happened, but usually it's few and far between. What I've started seeing recently is new remastered versions are actually just AI treated to kind of make them a bit softer and sharper, and they can just look a bit messy. So yeah.
I had heard, and I'm not sure if this is accurate, so hopefully people don't excoriate me in the comments, but I believe Thriller from Michael Jackson, the whole short 15-minute or whatever it was, got an actual like full 4K restoration. And I believe now you can see it on iTunes in 4K, digital 4K, of course. But I've been hoping and dreaming that something gets announced in the next couple of years where there's either, some random documentary on Michael Jackson or just a collection of something, and we get an actual UHD of Thriller. That would be mind-blowing to see nowadays.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, I mean, I remember when that video came. Remember when the video came out? As in, I don't mean the music video on TV, but remember there was like a sell-through video.
Yep.
That used to be everywhere, and it was so popular. And I have at home what I believe was the first video single, which is the Human League, where they did a 3 music video. But the problem was, back then, this was 83, 84, the cost of that videotape was £9.99, which was a lot of money then. So it was a great failed experiment because it was never going to be as popular as a single record or cassette or whatever. But I love the fact that it was attempted,
That's fantastic.
And it would have been great if, but the Thriller video, because didn't it have a making of as well afterwards?
Yep.
It was like the full
short little 3 or 4 minute thing afterwards.
Yeah. So really maximizing, but people didn't care. People just wanted to watch that video over and over again anyway.
And then dance away.
Yeah.
And that dance, everybody still knows it's crazy.
Yeah.
What all like musical styles are you into nowadays? Because I've seen you posting about going to some live shows recently too.
Oh, the only live show I've been into in the last 4 years was Pulp, actually. Yeah, live. What music I'm into? I got to be honest. I go down some really weird wormholes when it comes to music. For example, I got really into listening to a lot. Was that song "Popcorn"? Do you know that tune?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, and out of the blue, that just came up, and then it was funny. What started happening was I had a YouTube playlist created of the different music I've been listening to, and it was literally going from all these different decades. So it went from a disco tune to a new wave tune to something from the 90s to then something back from the 60s. It was just jumping around the place.
Right.
So I have these kind of random... There's a musician, an Irish musician called Keely, who, well, that's the name of the band. It's also the first name of the singer. But she just did her debut album recently, so I've been listening to that. Actually, that's quite good. I like that album. So that's the most recent thing. But yeah, partially because, partially because I have kids and just getting out of the house, is difficult, as you know yourself.
Yep.
But also with the pandemic and things. But I really want to start getting back to gigs again. I hope so too. I mean, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the most amazing. It's a film related gig, but back in goodness, I'm trying to remember when it was. Was it 2017? It must have been 2017, maybe, or maybe 2016 even. In Ireland, John Carpenter played. And it was one of these evenings where I went up to Dublin for it, so I'm down in Cork, went up to Dublin, and every second person we were bumping into was "Hi, Chris," because it was all the film. Yeah, exactly. Because besides doing my own stuff, I used to sometimes for Horathon, this film festival, the horror film festival that my friend Ed King organizes at the Irish Film Institute every year. I used to do Q&As, and sometimes for that, like I once did an onstage talk with Clive Barker.
Wow.
But it was just one of those things where it was so, wow, that's Clive Barker. Wow, that's Clive Barker. I can't remember one single thing I said to him, nor one single thing he said back to me. I just really wish it was recorded, because it was just, I got to keep this going and I'm ready to jump on the next question and all this stuff, But sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but it was just...
Please do.
It was just... Anyway, that was a great musical evening. But yeah, doing the Q&As and things, that can be fun. I did a Q&A with Abel Ferrara, which was an experience. Wonderful. I really enjoyed it. At one point, they, because the way you can be, the programmer told me afterwards, one of the programmers at the IFI said, at one point I went, "Oh, poor Chris, I better jump in now and say the Q&A's finished for the night, thanks." But then I came back with, back to Ferrara with a curveball where I was able to get it back on track. And what happened was I said to him, as I was trying to get at that, he loves one of Ferrara's favorite filmmakers is Pasolini. So I was saying to him, how did it feel to finally get to make your film about Pasolini? So it wasn't just the question being, how was it to make this film you've always wanted to make, but how was it to make this film about this person you idolize, admire, etc. And Abel just went to me, "It was great. It was like eating ice cream." Like, what a stupid question. He just looked at me and 250 people in the audience. But then I was able to come back to, but I'm talking about, you made a film about Pasolini. And then I got this wonderful answer from him. But initially he just looked at me like, "It was great. It's like eating ice cream."
Push back a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think he does that anyway. That's just the way he does it, That's just the way he does things. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, going off on tangents now, talk about Q&As and things. But yeah,
The show is a tangent. Come on. God, I'm fascinated by so much of this, and I want to just pull at every single string. But there's so many things. I mean, first of all, we haven't even gotten like a stable background. I believe you grew up for a little while, at least in the UK, before going to Ireland, right?
yeah. So my father's English, my mother's Irish, and I spent the first 10 years of my life. Well, I was born in Holland to make it more in the Netherlands to make it more confusing. Then, like 3 months old, moved back to the UK, and I lived in Cornwall. My father's from a town called Falmouth, and Falmouth I should say, we were based 30 miles away from where they filmed Straw Dogs.
Ah.
So, and it was really fascinating because, like, I like my grandmother, for example, who passed away a few years ago. The last film she ever saw in the cinema was probably the original release of Lawrence of Arabia in the 60s. She just wasn't into film,
right?
But she could tell you, "Oh, Straw Dogs with Dustin Hoffman," because it was such a local celebrity film, And you'd bump into people who would mention, "Oh, Straw Dogs, yeah." So I was there till 10. Then my parents moved to rural Ireland, a place called Kerry, a town called Kenmare in Kerry. So I was there for about 8 years. And then from there, I moved to Cork. And even though I've kind of moved around since I've been in Cork, like I lived in New York briefly, I lived in Toronto for a while, I lived in London.
Wow.
During that time, Cork was always my base. Right. So I always kind of came back to Cork, and my wife's from Cork. So, like about 12, 13 years ago, when things got really bad here and people were leaving Ireland to look for employment, there was me going back to Ireland to look for employment, and I ended up getting my job where I'm currently programming a cinema in Ireland, the Triskel Arts Centre. So a lot of bouncing around, that's why my accent might be a bit unusual. It's not Irish, but there might be certain phrases I say that might sound Irish, but it's not exactly West Country. Maybe a bit Mockney, I don't know, because it was like one thing my father used to try to do was try to get me to stop sounding incredibly Cornish, So West Country accent would sound a bit more like this, and my father would be like, "Let's go out together," and my father would be like, "No, say together." So it was kind of ingrained into me to try to, just not sound like I was from the West Country necessarily or whatever, just, so my accent's a bit all over the place. So, so that's my geographical background anyway.
Maybe those 3 months in Holland are really flavoring the accent.
Yeah.
Well, we heard about Cork being the home base. What about the film home base? Is there certain things, obviously, as you branch out towards all these other genres, is there a handful of things that you always go back to and you find yourself really drawn to?
Nothing in particular. What I mean by that is I bounce around so much, and I can get so interested in particular films or filmmakers or actors. There are certain people I'll always go back to. I've always loved and I'll always go back to. Like Nicholas Roeg, as I mentioned already, Brian De Palma, Lynn Ramsey. Lynn Ramsey's like my favorite contemporary filmmaker. I'm a huge fan of hers, and that's why working on the Morven Caller disc was such a important thing for me. Rob Zombie as well. I'm a big fan of Rob Zombie. I find it fascinating how much people either love him or hate him.
That was an unexpected answer.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I think Lords of Salem and Halloween 1 and 2. I'm a huge fan. I hosted the Irish premiere of Lords of Salem.
Wow.
In my current cinema program, which is a former church space. So to see Lords of Salem in this wooden cinema with old pews and things, it was quite something. It was a full house as well. It was really quite something. it's a special movie. I'm a big fan of that movie, but also I think Halloween 1 and 2 really hit me hard as well. I saw the second one again recently, and it's bloody hell, it's hard. It's harrowing stuff. I think, you know, I'm a really big fan of his work.
Me too.
Even the monsters recently. Sorry.
I still haven't gotten to the monsters yet. You're good. You're good. Keep on going. I just Halloween 2 is so much better than people give it credit for.
Yeah, I mean, I do admit that the director's cut works better than the theatrical cut because there was some compromises made. And the first time I saw it, the theatrical cut, I was underwhelmed by it. But when I went back to it a little while later, I absolutely loved it, and I really found it emotionally draining. You know, like the performances in that film, the characters. And also, I find a lot of his dialogue amusing as well. You know, just some of his characterizations and things. Yeah. So, and it's weird, like, and it's strange. I'm talking about. I mean, also like Claire Denis would be another director I'm a big fan of. You know, and. You know, there's a lot of modern directors. There's a lot of modern directors I liked as well. I'm blanking right now because I keep going back to the. It's funny because I'm so invested in thinking about older films because those are the projects I tend to get offered for video essays. I tend to linger in that world when I'm talking in these conversations, you know. But then when I'm in my film programming world, it's all contemporary with the occasional. Going back to older movies or special programs or seasons or something, you know.
Well, I mean, that's a really good segue into a common theme that seems to be over the internet for a lot of these, not to put them down, but like kind of film pretentious circles lately, is there are tons of people that will simply say they don't watch anything in the 21st century, or they don't see how anybody's going to the cinema for any film nowadays. Are there any, films from the last 5 or 8 years that are just masterpieces in your mind? Something that if somebody's really staying away from something in the 21st century that you would say, how have you not seen X? And not the film X there, although that was not intentional.
Yeah. God, good question. You put me on the spot now.
I am. As a film programmer, you got to be ready.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, do you know what it is? It's. I'll come up with some titles in a second. What it is ever since the pandemic, I just find I've kind of slightly lost
same
touch of time a little bit, and it just seems like this big discourse between different things, you know, or distance, I should say. Well, first of all, before I answer the question with some titles, I think it's really interesting that people have that opinion, and I understand why. Because filmmaking and the cinema going experience are not necessarily worse for me, but they're different to what it used to be. And I think that's the thing. When you grow up with something and it's a certain way, and then it's suddenly different.
Right.
And also, as you get older, you know, for example, I'm not a fan of superhero movies, the Marvel, DC comic movies, whatever. However, I would never dismiss them, even though I'm not a fan of them. I would never dismiss them because that's the same thing that people were doing in the early 80s with slasher films.
Exactly.
You know, so I enjoy slasher movies from that era and things. And if I was at the age now, the right age now for the comic book movies, maybe those would be my slasher movies.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Makes perfect
sense.
sense.
It's very important not to kind of do that. But in terms of recent years, films that I really, really liked, I'm thinking recently, the last couple of films that Jerzy Skolimowski made. Sorry, I know we're talking about modern cinema, but it's an older filmmaker, obviously, but we're talking about modern cinema. Like his recent film EO, or a film he made about 10 years ago called 11 Minutes.
Yeah,
I thought they were absolutely amazing, and it's fascinating to see an older filmmaker working with modern materials. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like working with digital, working with modern means, and it not feeling old, you know?
See how these people adapt, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. and some of Claire Denis' recent films. I'm blanking on the name of it, which was the film, the science fiction one with Robert Pattinson.
High Life?
High Life. Yeah, High Life. I mean, High Life was great.
Yeah.
And I just wish I could think of some more. Well, actually, there is a recent, more contemporary, younger filmmaker whose film I really liked, and that film is After Blue. Bertrand Mandico, I think I pronounced his name right, maybe not, but there's a company called Anti-World. Are you familiar with the Anti-World titles? Anti-World's titles?
Man, this is going to sound like we planned this. I swear to everybody watching, we did not. Literally last night, I do a weekly show where I talk about all the announcements, and we talked about surrealist films last night. And Bertrand Mandico came up, and we talked about him for a handful of minutes. But also, I do a newsletter for my patrons every month, and I just literally right before coming down here was getting up for the one that's coming out this weekend, and I just put up this big banner for Anti-Worlds. I love their stuff. They don't get nearly enough play, but I've been talking about them for a long time.
Well, me and a good friend of mine, Maximilian Lecain, who's another fellow experimental filmmaker, we're collaborating on a video essay for the upcoming UK Blu-ray release from Anti-Worlds of After Blue.
Wow.
So I'm allowed to reveal that. I double checked.
Very nice.
So I got a couple of different irons in the fire, which I can't reveal now, whatever. But that one I can. But yeah, that film I was really impressed by. But Anti-Worlds do some amazing films.
Oh yeah.
Earwig is the recent, which is the one that's upcoming.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's an amazing movie.
That and Murder Me Monster. I was really looking forward to Murder Me Monster.
Yeah, I haven't seen that myself yet. I'm looking forward to that as well. Yeah. And I mean, they've done some great stuff. I mean, they did that great documentary about artist Penny Slinger.
Yep.
Did you see that documentary? Yeah. That was a good documentary. We showed that. I think we're the only cinema in Ireland that showed it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a hard sell or whatever, but when I can, I like to try to support them. But yeah, that's After Blue was a film I really liked. So so I'm just blanking. I wish I could remember more titles. It's just I was so geared up in talking about older movies, and
right. I had to throw the curveball, and I totally get it. I keep joking that it feels like it's March 914th of 2020, just because time stood still for this longest time. And the weirdest thing is the world does keep spinning, obviously. I mean, my children have gotten a lot older. I've gotten a lot older in the last 3 years. But at the same time, so many things are still stuck fighting that same fight. I mean, we talked about media manipulation earlier, and the fact that this is a daily thing in our lives that we're literally fighting against, global conglomerates and trying to as of yesterday, we see the Screen Actors Guild going on strike. There are so many labor things that everybody's facing right now that has not changed in 3 years. And it's depressing, but it makes it feel like this odd, stagnant time.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like politically things, like in the last 5, 6, 7 years between like Brexit happening in the UK, different should we say political leaders in different countries, COVID, and then just so many, and then what's happening in the Ukraine, and everything. It just feels like we're being pelted with things at the moment, and then when one thing starts to kind of ease up, another thing starts happening, like what's happening with the the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild. And the environment and everything. It just feels like everything in the last couple of years just pelting us at the same time. Just when we think we're over one thing, something else comes up. Oh,
and by the way, the food you need to survive costs twice as much now too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's been a rough time, and I hope that we find a way out of it. And one of the things that I use to get out of it is cinema. So to wrap it up, thank you for your contributions and for giving a lot of us an escape. And 36 plus visual essays that have been astounding. I will link to some of my favorites in the description below. Everybody, please go support Chris. Again, his Vimeo is going to be down there. Lots of great stuff to check out. Chris is fantastic. Give him a follow on social media. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was fun, and I'm sure there's a million other things we could have discussed. As in, it was fun doing so, and yeah, thanks for asking me to be on your show.
I will absolutely be asking again because we have a lot of the same interests, and there's a lot more rabbit little trails that we can go down, I'm sure. All right, Chris, be safe. Have a good night, and we'll talk again soon.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you for watching The Disconnected. On the way out, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you've liked the video, and that you've copied the link to be able to share with someone else that may appreciate this.